So I tend to paint animals in weird environments like this one. And for these paintings, I tend to always start out in watercolor. Then I ink it, and then I use colored pencils. And one thing about my process that I've started noticing is just an over-reliance on colored pencils. And for these 10 paintings in particular, I've used this paper, the Langton. Fairly sure it's not 100% cotton, and it's cold pressed. I do think it works quite well on some parts. I kind of want this watercolor effect. At the same time, tend to over-rely on colored pencils for like the fur and stuff like that. And I thought that was mostly about my skill. This one ended up kind of similar. I started out with watercolor, didn't work out that well. So I started relying more and more on colored pencils to fix it. In both these cases, I think the results ended up kind of nice. At the same time, they barely look like watercolor. By and large, the end product doesn't show that much watercolor. And we can see that during the process. It starts out kind of bad and progresses to kind of bad. And then when I start using colored pencils, that is when it starts looking kind of decent, which in my mind sucks because I do like watercolor. But recently I kind of splurged and bought Arches 100% cotton with a rough grain. And I just noticed that my usual process didn't quite work. This is my most recent painting. Started out quite well. Started out kind of like how I wanted it. But the sky kind of became messy. So I tried going and correcting it with colored pencils. And because it's a rough grain, it was really tricky getting it to work and looking good. And so now it looks really dotted and textured, which I kind of ended up liking. But I also realized that it worked for the sky, but not for anything else. So the rest of this doesn't really have any colored pencils. I frankly couldn't use it. And so I started relying more on the watercolor. I didn't do that for the animal. The animal still has a lot of colored pencils. But this one is like 50-50 colored pencils and watercolor in the end result. Whereas this one is almost entirely colored pencils in the end result. So for the next painting, because the colored pencils worked like they do on this rough grain material, I ended up painting it entirely in watercolor. I only used a splash of colored pencils for the eyes. The rest of it, the animal, the background, the trees, everything was just watercolor and inking. This entire painting is just watercolor and inking. And I think if we disregard the composition, I think the painting itself, the quality of the paint, the quality of the strokes, the quality of the nuance, probably my favorite so far. And it has no colored pencils, it's just watercolor and inking. And what I've come to realize is that I think my bad watercolor was mostly due to bad paper. I think with this new paper, as expensive as it is, it really makes a difference in how smooth and nice your end result becomes. Your control over the paint. It just looks better. I don't think I could have achieved this fur texture on this paper. And it's weird because the rough grain was kind of an impulse buy. I was like, let's try it. It might suck with colored pencils, but let's try it. It did suck with colored pencils, but it just meant that I started relying more on watercolor. And I think, well, and honestly, looking at the result, I might not actually use that much colored pencils anymore. I think this turned out really well. Sometimes the quality of your end result is not about your art skills. It's about the materials you buy. I do like the Langton. It works fine. But honestly, if you're gonna spend 10 hours painting on a painting, it's worth paying $9 for better paper. Thanks for watching. Bye.